and unjustifiable whether they target people in Nairobi or in Bali, in Mumbai or in New York or Kibbutz Be'eri, whether they are carried out by ISIS or by Boko Haram, Lashkar-e-Taiba or by Hamas, whether victims are targeted for their faith, ethnicity, nationality or any other reason. This Council, the United Nations Security Council, has a responsibility to denounce member states that arm, fund, train Hamas or any other terrorist group that carries out such horrific acts. Now, it's interesting that something as basic as this, that you cannot have armed combatants taking on unarmed civilians for whatever reason they choose to, you cannot play by the established rules of rule of law, rules of war, civilized world behavior for such barbarians. Now, there was a big debate that happened at the UN Security Council. Antonio Guterres, who's the UN Security Council, said that the October 7th attacks did not occur in a political vacuum. Israel has responded by saying that Palestinian cause, howsoever justifiable it may be, does not justify the kind of crimes that Hamas perpetrated on innocent Israeli civilians on October 7th. Mr. Guterres went on to say that Palestinians have been subjected to suffocating occupation, and he may be right. Yes, Gazans have been subjected to this occupation. Those in the West Bank have been subjected to this occupation. Israel's response to that is that this is pure blood libel by the United Nations Secretary General. Mr. Guterres also went on to say that hopes of a political solution are vanishing. And in here, the Israelis are to blame, the Palestinian leadership is also to blame, but Israel has responded to this by saying that this is clear victim blaming. Hamas are the new Nazis. Now, Israel continues to hit back at the United Nations Secretary General, with the Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, in fact, tweeting, and this is part of our Motorola India's best 5G smartphone brands tweet of the day.
Hello, Moto.
This is what the Israeli Foreign Minister Eli Cohen has said. I will not meet with the UN Secretary General after October 7th massacre. There is no place for a balanced approach. Hamas must be erased off the face of the planet. All right, so let's go to our big debate tonight. Debate 1 here on Brass Tacks. Should the rules of war, as the international community, as the UNSC has demanded that Israel follow, should those rules of war apply to terrorists as well?
Hello, Moto.
All right, I've got a special panel joining us this evening. Daniel Carman is former Israeli ambassador to India. He's joining us live from Tel Aviv. Mona Alam is a senior Pakistani journalist joining us from Islamabad. Navdeep Suri, former Indian diplomat, and Professor Peter Kuznick is director of a Nuclear Studies Institute at the American University. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Ambassador Carman, let me start with you first. What the international community, and you heard what Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, has been saying, other ambassadors, particularly in the Gulf Arab countries, have been saying at the UNSC, that Israel cannot go in with this blank check, that Israel has to follow the rules of war. My question to you is, clearly Hamas or Lashkar-e-Taiba or Boko Haram or Al-Qaeda are not following these rules of war, but civilized states, states which believe in the rule of law, there is a higher standard expected of them, or at least that was the subtext of the debate that happened in the UNSC. How do you respond to that?
Well, first, let me go back to yesterday's statement by the Secretary General. The Secretary General of the United Nations is expected not to give interpretations of his own and not to take sides and not to tell under which umbrella or vacuum or non-vacuum these atrocities were committed. And I don't have to tell you, you've seen all the videos, what atrocities have been committed. The same United Nations cannot, up to date, even define what terror is. We all know what terrorism is.
Yep.
Terror is terror is terror. Definitely India knows what terror is. Israel knows what terror is. But the United Nations have not up to date defined it. And by the way, there is a big Indian effort to lead a process of defining what terrorism is, but it's unsuccessful. And I think it shows something about the United Nations and its efficiency. I'm not in government anymore, and I have to tell you that I suggested in my tweet, if I may say so, our foreign minister not to go to the Security Council. It was a hopeless debate. We didn't think the Secretary General would speak that badly about almost justifying what happened with Hamas on the 7th of October. But he did go, he did speak, he did cancel the meeting with the Secretary General. I know that the Secretary General has tried to correct himself today, but he hasn't apologized. We definitely expect an apology from a Secretary General of an organization where we are stakeholders and shareholders exactly as any member state.
Okay.
A deficiency, one more sentence, please. A deficiency of the international community, and I think you hinted to it, that there are rules of war, but the non-state actors in the rules of war are not treated as they should be. And the international community should make a big effort to adjust to the new kind of battlefield. And the new kind of battlefield, and you know it in India, is also terrorism.
So let me ask Navdeep Suri this. It's no one's case, Ambassador Suri, that there is no political underlying cause. Howsoever justifiable the political underlying cause may be, what is unjustifiable, what is almost unconscionable, is kidnapping 85-year-old grandmothers, is killing young 6-year-old baby Moshe's parents, both of them in front of his eyes. Clearly, no cause in the world justifies that kind of action. And the point that Ambassador Carmen made, I think it's well taken. India has been pushing for this. Surely the international community can come together to agree that this is terrorism and this is unacceptable. Whether Hamas carries it out, or Lashkar-e-Taiba carries it out, or Boko Haram carries it out, or Al-Qaeda carries it out, you cannot attack innocent, non-combatant civilians, howsoever justifiable you have a political grievance. Ambassador Suri.
So I think there's zero justification for terrorism, and what Hamas did was an absolutely abhorrent act of terror. Let's not dispute that. Let's use that as the starting point. I also want to compliment the work that Ambassador Daniel Carmen has been doing on the side for the hostages that are still held by Hamas. But I think the point that I have been trying to make is that states are held to a different standard because they have signed up to international conventions that terrorist organizations are not liable for. States sign up to the Geneva Convention. States sign up to other international agreements on how civilians are to be treated in a war situation. And I think that's where part of the debate. The debate is not whether Hamas is a terrorist organization or not. The debate is not on what Hamas did was a terrorist act or not. But what next? We know it was a terrorist act. But does Israel, as a responsible, civilized state, deserve to be held to a higher standard than a terrorist organization? And I believe that for the respect that we have for Israel, it should be held to a higher standard. And this is something that many in Israel are saying, that we need to be different from the terrorists.
Absolutely. If I may, and I want to come to the wall to just bring in a bit of an intervention there. I absolutely agree with you that the rules that govern nation states, the civilized world, has to be to a higher level than the rules by which terrorist organizations operate. I absolutely agree with you on that. The problem is also, Ambassador Suri, that these terrorist organizations do not operate in vacuum. Clearly, we know here in India, and we've been at the receiving end of this, that Lashkar-e-Taiba is supported actively by a state actor, right? Similarly, Hamas, although neither the Israelis nor the Americans have put out any evidence in the public domain yet, but the scale of those attacks that we saw on October 7th, Hamas has not acted in isolation. Clearly, there were state support for Hamas from some players in that region. Again, I don't want to name countries. What happens to what happens to the state actors? Yes, the non-state actors don't have to play by the rules that civilized states have set for themselves. But what about the state support that these organizations get, Ambassador Suri?
So I think without naming it, you are suggesting Iran, and I think there is enough circumstantial evidence to indicate that Iran's hand is behind Hamas. We will debate for some time to come whether they actually green-lighted the terrorist attack, whether they provided logistical support or whatever. But Iran is already under a whole slew of international sanctions. Iran is under US sanctions for a variety of reasons. There's the whole issue about Iran's nuclear program. Beyond Iran's nuclear program, there's the whole issue of its interference in the affairs of its neighbors, starting from Saudi Arabia to Bahrain to UAE to Iraq to Syria and Lebanon. And we're aware of that. But where does that take us? So are you going to put more sanctions on Iran, which is the most sanctioned country in the world today? Do that. Does that solve any problem? Are you going to physically attack Iran and then deal with the consequences of a wider regional conflict? So I really don't understand where this takes us. Yes, we know that Iran openly supports groups from the Houthis in Yemen all the way to Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. And then, what's the next step? And I keep asking this question because I don't know what happens the day after. I really, this is a time for anyone who loves the region as I do, a time for profound pessimism, where we can talk about destroying Hamas, but we are not willing to explore what happens after that in terms of durable peace in the region.
No, again, to that extent, I absolutely agree with Ambassador Suri. If Israel's plan is to go in and cut Hamas off its knees, make sure that Hamas militarily is not in a position ever, as Netanyahu said, for the next 50 years, to be able to launch an attack on Israel like it did on October 7th, you are not going to achieve that by just a military operation. You are certainly not going to achieve that by going in for a military operation, completing that military operation, and then leaving a vacuum behind, because that vacuum is only going to breed another Hamas. But be that as it may, I'm getting a piece of breaking news before I go to the other guests who are waiting. Israel has now agreed to delay its ground operations, its ground invasion into Gaza. This is on the request of the United States. And the reason the US has asked for this and has made this request of Israel is so that the US can get its own missile defenses in place in the region to protect American troops, whether this is in Syria or in Iraq or in Yemen. US defenses want to bring in missile defense systems so that American troops who are working in the wider region, they are protected. So, Professor Koznick, clearly America is also caught in a bind. Last week, when this debate happened in the UNSC, out of the 15 member states, I think 14 of them voted, or at least were against Israel. America, by virtue of being a permanent member and by virtue of having a veto power, was the only country that vetoed that suggestion, right? So America, on the one hand, has to throw its weight entirely behind Israel. But at the same time, as Ambassador Suri said, and others have been saying, civilized countries, nation states, need to be held up to a different standard than terrorist organizations. And if that means that civilized states have to take extra protection or make sure that civilians are not harmed, if you want to go after the terrorists, go after the terrorists, but you cannot have large-scale killing of civilians, then that's a standard, that's a burden that Israel has to carry.
Yes, what Hamas did was unconscionable, unforgivable, has to be universally condemned, and the Hamas leaders have to be held accountable. But what Israel is doing in response is shocking the world right now. We know that almost half the population in Gaza are children. According to the figures I've seen, perhaps 40% of all those killed in the Israeli bombing attacks so far have been children. These people are not guilty. So what's going on is a form of collective punishment. And collective punishment is against international law. So Israel does have to be held to a much higher standard than Hamas. And unfortunately, Israel's actions are compromising its moral authority in the world and uniting much of the world against it, even though there was so much sympathy for Israel in the beginning. Maybe not universal as there should have been. And then, but when the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations condemns Guterres for saying that this didn't occur in a vacuum, he is not defending what Hamas did by any means, and he hasn't, and he shouldn't. But he's saying there's a long history here, and if we're going to get beyond this ever, if we're going to be able to solve this at some point, then we're going to need to understand the provocations on all sides, because everybody is to blame here. The United States is, Israel is, the Palestinians are, Turkey with its recent statements. I mean, there's enough blame to go around.
Yeah.
And we've got looking at it from the standpoint how we settle this at some point in the future, because this has gone on for many, many decades and is going to continue. If they kill people they kill the Hamas leadership, they don't end Hamas. Hamas is an idea. It's a movement. Many of us may deplore certain aspects of it, but it's not going to it can't be solved militarily. And I wish the people in the region would understand that.
Before I go to Mona Alam, and I want to go across to that wall, I want to get a quick response from Ambassador Carmen, because both Ambassador Suri and Professor Kuznick are saying pretty much the same thing. A, that civilized states have signed up to treaties and conventions. As a diplomat, you will agree with the principle that countries like Israel, India, the United States have to live up to a certain higher standard. And two, the very practical sort of problem that Israel confronts is, in the aftermath of October 7th, the moral high ground was with Israel. But the longer this ground operation continues and the more civilian casualties there are, the more pictures of children getting killed in rocket attacks and in airstrikes and the subsequent ground invasion that is imminent anytime now, Israel loses that moral high ground, whether it's in the UN Security Council or whether it is in the court of global opinion. How do you respond to that, Ambassador Carmen?
Well, I would start by saying I would caution very much the data and the information that the other side, that Hamas, gives out to the public. And I think that we've heard at least 3 or 4 world leaders who have said one way or the other, we don't have to believe Hamas propaganda anymore. And I'll just give you an example. The hospital that was hit by a Islamic Jihad rocket. When Israel was accused that it bombed it, it was 500 people that were, so to speak, hit. But when the world understood that it's a failed launch of a rocket, all of a sudden the Hamas narrative changed, and there were only few dozens of people who were hit in the hospital. And with this game of propaganda, we have to live. So I would caution very much what my predecessor has said about half the people are children, etc., etc. I would caution, because it's those are this is the propaganda of the minute.
Okay.
When you said about moral high ground, I must tell you something that maybe you haven't heard before, but we need the moral high ground for ourselves, first of all, not for the world. The world comes second. First of all, we have to be sure that when we send our kids, and I have a daughter in the army, when we send our kids to the army to fight those murderers who did such atrocities with our people, innocent Israeli and foreigners, we want to be sure that when they fight, they do not lose the moral high ground. And it's first and foremost for ourselves. Now, what we have on the ground, the ground assault has not started yet, by the way.
Yeah.
But the Palestinians the non-involved Palestinians have gotten a request or a suggestion to go to a specific area where they will be safe. Those who went there will be safe. Those who stuck with Hamas, or those who were obliged by Hamas to stay in the area, this could be what is called the collateral damage. But they've had a week now. They might have a few more days to go south of the Gaza River. It's called. Go south. You will not be hurt, and you will get humanitarian help there.
Okay.
Those things are taken care of.
Okay. I want to also bring in a quote that has just come some time back, and this is attributed to the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's made a big statement in Istanbul just a short while back. Mr. Erdogan, the elected leader of Turkey, has said that Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Mr. Erdogan, the elected leader of Turkey, has said that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, but it's a group of liberation, that Hamas is trying to save its homeland. Mr. Erdogan goes on to say that it's actually Israel which is acting like a terror group. And I want to ask Mona Alam this. This is not some, some person who's at the fringes of international geopolitics. This is the elected leader of a very influential power in the Middle East, simply refusing to acknowledge the kind of crimes that Hamas carried out on October 7th. Forget about that for a moment. There are still, by Israeli accounts, by American accounts, at least 200 hostages, people who were taken hostage on the 7th of October, who are still in Hamas custody. How can these guys not be called a terror organization? At the very least, they are kidnappers, they are murderers, they are extortionists. I mean, if they were really interested in peace, all they need to do is to return those hostages. Why did they take the hostages in the first place? What do those hostages have to do anyway with the ongoing Israeli-Palestine confrontation, which has been going on for the better part of the last 70 years? Mona Alam.
Well, Zaka, actually, the casualties of children and women and unarmed civilians being claimed are questionable. But, as a basic principle, of course, I would agree with everybody here. Unarmed civilians and being attacked, unarmed civilians in the garb of any excuse, any reason is extremely unjustifiable. Nobody ever can justify this. But having said that, the issue doesn't just arise yesterday or doesn't just arise on the October 7th. This is almost a decade-long issue, which is primarily about, the right of self-determination for the Palestinians. And this is where it has started from. I'm so sorry to just observe the entire world and primarily the superpowers, the global superpowers. I thought you quoted accounts of both US and Israel. And ironically, they're both one and the same thing. They're hand and glove. But the problem is nobody, and especially the two of them, are not talking about the resolution of the matter, which happens to be the Palestinian and Israeli conflict at hand. It has been almost a decade since, this entire issue is going on and on. Chemical weapons have been used against the Palestinian people. We must also not let go or forego those facts. These are all facts.
But Mona Alam, if you agree with I don't know if you do agree with this contention by Erdogan that Hamas is not a terrorist organization, then you should also call the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan not a terrorist organization. They're a liberation movement. The Baloch Liberation Army should also be called that. They're not a terrorist organization, but that's not how I remember Pakistan characterizing either of these groups.
I may counter that argument because they do not have a grievance to start off with. I mean, Balochistan, it happens to be a sovereign part of Pakistan, and if there are some people who want Balochistan as a separate homeland, then they're pursuing it against the state of Pakistan. Balochistan is not a conflicted territory.
India makes the same argument in Kashmir. I've never seen you accept that Kashmir is a sovereign part of India, and if some people want to fight, then that's a fight against the Indian state. I can extend that same argument. You've never taken that position on any of our shows.
Because we've always spoken about Kashmir, and Kashmir also happens to be very synonymous to the issue of Palestine. I mean, you talk about UN resolutions, it happens to be a conflicted territory. The people, the inhabitants of the land still have to have their right of self-determination.
That's what I'm saying. By that same logic, so do the Balochis, right? By that same logic, so do the Balochis. What are the Buktis fighting for? They're fighting for their, as you said, quote unquote, right to self-determination.
Land that is where the differentiation arises, Zaka.
Okay, so Balochistan was never contested land, but Kashmir and Israel are contested. What about Israel's sovereign rights? Does it not have any sovereign rights?
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Can I intervene with a...
Yes, Ambassador Carmen. Yes,
Israel
yes.
is back.
Yeah, if I can intervene and remind
your
audience that in 2006, Israel went out of Gaza. We disengaged from Gaza. Gaza became an autonomous territory, and the first thing that happened there was an overthrow, a military coup by Hamas against the Palestinian Authority. And atrocities were carried out by Hamas. Hamas, who some say is not a terrorist organization, atrocities against the Palestinian Authority people who were kicked out towards the West Bank, and it became Hamastan. And unfortunately, they went from strength to strength, and we reached the situation in which we were on the 7th of October, which is something we still cannot understand.
There are state links to every non-state entity. Nobody denies, and non-state entities cannot flourish on their own. They cannot function on their own without state supports. This is undeniable, and of course.
So which is the state, Mona, that is behind Lashkar-e-Taiba, that is behind Jaish-e-Mohammed? Surely they can't also survive without some kind of state support.
I don't think they're surviving because they're as good as gone. They're in house arrests. Their leaders are in house arrests. There've been also reports that their children were, I think, attacked or kidnapped some days ago. You know what I'm talking about. But I mean, they're not in a good position. The last attack that they did was, I think, 26/11. That was years ago. No matter how sorry that attack was, how unfortunate that attack was, but it's been a while. They're not functional, as you say.
Ambassador Suri wants to come in. It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to respond in a way to, no dispute that Hamas is a terrorist organization, but I think there are two elements that should be, if we want to keep this a fact-based discussion, there are two elements that we need to take into account. One, yes, Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2006, but Israel continued to exercise complete control on airspace, on access, on airport, on ports, on fishing, all of that. And that is why Gaza is called the world's largest open-air jail, that it was in a very controlled space where people are unable to really exercise any aspirations. The second aspect really is something that is being discussed intensely in Israeli media, but is glossed over in our discussions, is the relationship that has existed between the Israeli intelligence and Hamas since 2006 and actually since 1980s, if one were to take a longer term view. There were clear arrangements, and there was a rationale for those arrangements, I think, from an Israeli government perspective, which was to deny a two-state solution for as long as possible. You create a division in the Palestinian entity. You have the PLO, or the Palestine Authority, which is only West Bank. You have a separate entity called Hamas in Gaza. And who do you talk to? How do you create a two-state solution? There's been, I think, the reason why we are in this place today partly is the unwillingness of successive Israeli governments to take forward the idea of a two-state solution and to actually create a reality on the ground today where no matter what you do, it's going to be really, really, really hard to create a two-state solution. So what do you do?
Okay.
I keep asking this question. There is the now and immediate, and that's what news is interested in, and it's important to focus. But what happens the day after?
Okay. I'll leave it at that because I'm completely out of time. But I think the Israeli response, the Israeli counter-argument to that was, because of whom did Camp David fall through? Because of whom did the Oslo peace process fall through? Yitzhak Rabin died for peace. the proposal that he had put up, why did that fall through? When Ehud Barak was prime minister, the proposal that he had put up, why did that fall through? So anyway, I don't want to go back into history, but yes, I will conclude and I'll take a break on this note that yes, Israel right now, the wounds are so fresh, it's so raw, the images from October 7th are so real and so upfront that right now what that country requires, and this is the assessment of the political leadership there, is some form of retribution. And if that means militarily cutting Hamas's legs off, then that's what it entails. But how do you ensure that there isn't another Hamas coming up, or there isn't another entity that comes up once this military operation concludes, once there is a vacuum? What replaces Hamas should also be thought through, because that's not the question for the day after tomorrow. That's the question you plan for today, so that you know when that question confronts you the day after tomorrow what the answer might be. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, there's now a fresh flashpoint between the governor of Tamil Nadu, Ravi, and the DMK over Remembrance Day for freedom fighters, the likes of the Nadu brothers. The governor's contention is that some of these freedom fighters, local freedom fighters, have not been given pride of place because of Dravidian politics. That and more right on the other side of this quick break.
Hello, Moto.
वोट है। युद्ध अगर बहुत आगे भी बढ़ा तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी। ये देख सकते बहुत मजबूती से इन जगहों को बनाया गया है। ये पूरा जो इमरजेंसी वोट है, यहाँ बॉम्ब रॉकेट का असर नहीं होगा। आप देख सकते हैं इनकी इसकी मजबूती, गेट, ये स्टील, ये देखिए इसकी मजबूती। जिस तरह से शेल्टर होते हैं दक्षिणी इजराइल में, उस तरह के शेल्टर की तरह ये पूरा अस्पताल है। बॉम्बिंग होते रहे, कोई असर नहीं होने वाला। हमारे साथ बातचीत करने के लिए मौजूद हैं अस्पताल के। व्हाट्स योर नेम मैम एंड व्हाट्स योर पोजीशन?
Sharon Mann from the International Affairs Department at Galilee Medical Center.
Tell me about something about this hospital. What is the characteristics? It is the closest hospital near the border.
Yes, this is the closest hospital to any border of Israel. It's we're 6 miles from the Lebanese border, the northern border, and we serve a very diverse community of
More than 6 lakhs.
Yeah, we serve a community of about 660,000 people.
What is here you told me that even bomb can't destruct the structure.
Our emergency department is fortified and protected.
This is very protected.
Yes, so it can be completely closed.
This is like a shelter.
It is exactly a shelter. It is exactly a shelter. So the idea is to provide a structure that we can provide care, hopefully all the time in times of peace, but
and the time of war, because your country is in the time of war.
Yes, but also in the time of war. We want
Can you tell me something about the structure? कुछ बता सकती हैं? Can you tell?
It's built. You can see the very thick walls. It could be completely.
बहुत मोटी दीवारें हैं, देखिएगा। और कुछ है?
It's fortified. It's protected. It's essentially a bomb shelter.
From top also?
It's a bomb shelter essentially, and
ये बॉम्ब शेल्टर है, इमरजेंसी वार्ड है, लेकिन बॉम्ब शेल्टर की तरह भी इसका इस्तेमाल होता है। यहाँ अगर बॉम्बिंग भी हो, जिस तरह के रॉकेट हमास छोड़ता है दक्षिणी इलाके में या हिजबुल्ला छोड़ता है उत्तरी इलाके में, लेबनान इजराइल के बॉर्डर पे हैं, यहाँ कुछ भी हमला होता है तो असर नहीं होगा। यहाँ ये these glasses are bomb.
Well, you can see that's outside the door, but the ceiling that is over the area where the ambulances come in.
Please show me.
Is also built to a higher fortified dimension.
देखिए ये भी fortified है।
It provides protection.
ये भी जब एम्बुलेंस से मरीजों को लाया जाता है तो ये भी फोर्टिफाइड है, यानी इतना मजबूत है कि बॉम्ब और रॉकेट का असर नहीं होगा। इस तरीके से बनाया गया तो यहाँ भी लोग छुपेंगे। और ये ग्लासेस जो हैं ये बुलेट प्रूफ हैं, स्प्लिंटर प्रूफ है। हम आपको
incoming patients and healthcare workers are provided protection as
तो
they.
सबको प्रोटेक्शन मिलेगा, जो चाहे इंजर्ड हो, जो सोल्जर आए, जो आम नागरिक आए या आम लोग हो, यहाँ के स्टाफ हो, अगर यहाँ वो हैं तो जो इलाज की पूरी कार्रवाई होती है उस पर कोई असर नहीं होगा। और हम सबसे इजराइल और किसी देश के बॉर्डर के बीच में, इजराइल और बाकी देशों के बीच जो बॉर्डर है उसके सबसे नजदीक के अस्पताल में है। और
Welcome back. There is a fresh showdown between Tamil Nadu Governor Ravi and the DMK government over the remembrance ceremony for freedom fighters, the Marudu brothers, Periya Marudu and Chinna Marudu, who took on the East India Company in the late 1700s. They were captured and executed in 1801, but their exploits against the British has been the stuff of legend. But the Tamil Nadu governor has accused the DMK of reducing these freedom fighters to the status of caste leaders. He also said that even if leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Sardar Patel were born in Tamil Nadu, they would have been reduced to caste leaders as well. Ravi also claimed that there was a false narrative on the racial divide of Dravidians and Aryans. Both the Congress and the DMK have condemned the governor's statement. The DMK says it honors and celebrates all its leaders, calling the governor's remarks ignorant.
If Mahatma Gandhi, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Sardar Patel, Shahid Bhagat Singh, if they were born here in Tamil Nadu, they too would have been reduced as caste leaders. Such is the situation here today.
The biggest caste-wise exercise was announced by the BJP government recently with allocating huge money to that. It is Vishwakarma Yojana. What is Vishwakarma Yojana? The biggest government-sponsored, Modi government-sponsored scheme, caste-wise dividing scheme is Vishwakarma Yojana.
All right, joining us on this face-off, Sanju Verma is national spokesperson of the BJP. Yes, Dharanidharan is spokesperson of the DMK. Dharanidharan, the governor's contention is where local freedom fighters like the Marudu brothers, Muthuramalingam Thevar, etc. are not taught in school textbooks. They've been reduced to just caste leaders. Their contribution to the freedom movement has been undermined. That's the contention by the governor. How do you respond?
See, I think when we should be speaking development, I think this is my 100th debate on this governor who has violated all the constitution norms and who doesn't behave in a manner that is befitting of a governor. He's nothing but an RSS propaganda ideologue. That's how he's been behaving. It's not the first incident. I've been in your show several times. So this is sad because he does not want to accept the fact that DMK is giving the best possible government in Tamil Nadu. And because of that, he time and again comes and creates trouble. He doesn't understand Tamil, he doesn't understand Tamil history, right? If there's only one party, right, that's trying to destroy Indian culture, that is the BJP. If there's the one party that's trying to destroy Indian history, that's the BJP. If there's the one party that's trying to destroy Indian pluralism, that's the BJP.
But Dharani, answer the question. Dharani, answer the question. The question is that what are kids in Tamil Nadu government schools being taught about the Marudu brothers, Periya Marudu and Chinna Marudu, and what are they being taught about Muthuramalingam Thevar? These are all freedom fighters in their own right. But are they taught that, or are they taught that these are caste leaders who fought for their own groupings?
They are definitely portrayed as freedom fighters. Last 6 months back, our leader went and inaugurated the statue of Marudu brothers also. The date to be precise around sometime in February 2023. So this is only to digress from the issue, that is DMK is providing Dravidian model government which is creating ripples across the country, and BJP is not able to tolerate the success of the government. Time and again they want to portray us as anti-religion. Sanjeev, please stop laughing, okay? BJP does not have anything to show us development. What happened to the 2 crore job? What happened to the 2 crore job? talk
Okay.
about jobs, talk
Okay,
about
then
employment,
one second,
talk
one
about
second, one
employment,
second.
talk
Let-
about GDP growth.
Yeah, fine. Your
cannot interrupt
contention,
me.
your
No, no.
contention
This is not
is
the topic of the
that
debate.
BJP is doing all of this because you have nothing to show for. You are jealous of the
Oh,
Dravidian model
talking
of governance.
about where is a job
So,
for the youth
let her
is
respond.
not topic of the
Let
debate.
her respond.
Fantastic. See,
Calm down, let her
Sanjeev
respond.
answered. See,
Sanju.
Sanjeev has answered it.
Yeah, Sanju
don't
Verma.
allow me to heckle.
Okay,
Why
Sanju
you are giving me-
Verma
No,
is
10 seconds.
answering. Please listen. Yeah,
10
thank you.
seconds.
No, I will not
10
debate like
10
this
seconds.
because I did not
10
heckle
seconds.
this man till the very end.
No, no,
He has
so
a problem if I smile.
he
has a problem if I smile on your show.
You please answer the
Look at
question.
this idiot.
You please
Look at
answer
this
the question,
moron.
ma'am. Please.
Look
please.
at this moron.
Let's get to the question, please, and the answer for the question.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Oh,
And
don't
Zaka,
call me
please.
morons.
Yes,
See,
you
I
are
think
one. You are a moron. You are a third-rate moron. Now shut up.
No,
Zaka,
one
let
second,
me
please.
come in.
No personal attacks. Please answer the question. Yeah.
Yes. Now
Sanju
I'm
Verma.
answering the question. Thank you. Zaka, I will come straight to the point. First and foremost, on every debate of yours, I always say that let us go beyond the semantics and argue on the basis of constitutional provisions. On the basis of constitutional provisions, right from Article 153 till Article 164, the governor has extraordinary executive, legislative, financial, judicial and discretionary powers. What has the government done? And what has the governor done? Now let us be very clear. I did not heckle you, Zaka. As far as the government of Tamil Nadu is concerned, under the aegis of M.K. Stalin, law and order has taken a flying leap out of the window. M.K. Stalin is not just the chief minister, but also Zaka. I refuse to debate like this because you did not
One
allow
second,
me to be.
Dharani, let's have a one person speaks at one person's time. So yes, Sanju Verma, finish your point, and then I'll come to you, Dharani. Yeah.
I need my time because you gave him a long interruption and I was quiet. He had a problem with me smiling.
Please go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm waiting for you to respond. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going ahead. Please don't rush me. Let me speak my mind. First and foremost, what has the Tamil Nadu government done? Under M.K. Stalin, the incompetent M.K. Stalin, who is not only the chief minister but also the home minister of Tamil Nadu, law and order has taken a flying leap out of the window. A man called Vinod hurled a crude petrol bomb outside the BJP's Chennai office. And look at the audacity of that man. He's been released a few days back. And today, he had the audacity to hurl a petrol bomb outside the Tamil Nadu Raj Bhavan. Obviously, the target was the governor, Mr. R.N. Ravi. And I want to ask the Tamil Nadu DGP, though the DGP has changed now, earlier it was C. Sailendra Babu, now it is Mr. Shankar Jiwal. The then DGP Sailendra Babu had said in February 2022, let us not make a mountain out of a molehill because this young man Vinod is mentally unstable and mentally challenged.
Okay.
If this young man is mentally unstable, as per the earlier DGP of Tamil Nadu, why on earth was this man left to be amok?
Okay, so this is your contention that this is all being done to divert attention from the deteriorating law and order situation.
20 seconds more. 20 seconds
Okay, 20
more,
seconds
please, Zaka.
more. Yeah, 20 seconds more.
20 seconds more. A, law and order has taken a flying leap out of the window. B, Zaka, I just want to tell you one very important thing. The problem is not with Governor R.N. Ravi. BNK has a problem because the governor for the second time using his discretionary powers has refused to appoint the ex-DGP C. Sailendra Babu as the head of the Tamil Nadu Public Services Commission. And no wonder that has left.
I think it's already
Okay.
BNK's MK Stalin, his son.
Okay, so
Udayanithi
2
Stalin,
points that
and
Sanju Verma has
Babu
made.
completely
One, law and order. Dharani Dharan, please explain
rattled.
how is it that a man who was caught for hurling a petrol bomb outside the BJP office today hurls a petrol bomb outside the Raj Bhavan? I mean,
Exactly.
isn't that an example of deteriorating law and order situation, Dharani?
And this
I
man is giving me
see.
a
I can't believe how is it possible that the BJP spokesperson calls me what she did, and then you did not even rebuke her. I think that remark has to be expunged, and she has to apologize before the end of this debate. Point one. Point two. Right? When I spoke about unemployment.
Okay. Now let Dharani respond, please. Yeah, let Dharani respond, please. Thank you, ma'am. Please, ma'am. Ma'am, please.
When I spoke about
Dharani Dharan, answer the question,
when
please.
I spoke
Law and
about
order.
what happened to 2 crore jobs.
No, but
when
law
I-
and order,
when
law
I
and
spoke
order,
about
please.
2 crore jobs. Let me complete. See, I know I am coming to that. When I spoke about where is 2 crore jobs for the youth, she's asking is out of topic. So that is very clear. BJP wants to digress. Digress from what? From real issues, employment, growth, etc., etc., and etc. Right? Having said that, the Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah are incompetent. That is why Manipur was burning, still burning. 50,000 people were left homeless.
But
50,000 people left homeless.
Please answer the
50,000
question.
people left
Please
homeless.
answer the question that I asked.
First
How is
letter
it a
answer.
person
First
who
letter
threw a
answer.
petrol
You
bomb
letter
outside
answer.
the
What happened
BJP
to Manipur?
office?
Why was the chief minister
3
not
months
changed?
later throws a
What
petrol
was
bomb
National
outside
Secretary
Raj Bhavan?
Ajit Doval doing?
Is that
If she can pinpoint
not a
RDDP
concern
doing wonderful
for the
job,
state government,
I can
sir?
pinpoint that Ajit Doval. I can pinpoint Ajit Doval for not doing his job as a national security advisor on Manipur, right? If she can question our DGP who is doing a wonderful job, what is Ajit Doval doing? How come he did not predict Manipur happening? 50,000 people are left homeless. What did the chief minister go and say when woman video of being paraded naked came out? He had the atrocities.
So the second point that she made is you are out to get the governor because governor is not sanctioning some of the names you have recommended as vice chancellors or appointees to state commissions.
The union government. Tamil Nadu's law and order has improved in the last 2 years. Tamil Nadu is one of the peaceful states. Can Sanjeev Verma prove me wrong? Union government data on law and order. She can get the data for 21, 22 and prove me wrong. All the data points to the fact that last 2 years.
One second. Sanjeev Verma, the debate was on whether the governor should be interested in what history textbooks are teaching school students there. You have not answered that. Yeah, you answer that, but please only answer that. That's the question.
Thank you. Why is it that when he is answering Zaka, I see him alone on the screen and I am not given a chance to heckle, but the moment my turn comes, this man is shouting. Anyway, thank you. I can see myself.
You're there on screen.
Yes, I can see that. My bad. My apologies for that. Zaka, I will just tell you this. Tell me the governor is the first citizen of the state. Forget for a fact that he enjoys discretionary executive legislative powers under the constitution, blah, blah, blah. Even as a bona fide citizen, why should he not? And, forget the fact that he's a governor, even as a bona fide citizen. All that he said was, I asked for a list of the freedom fighters from Tamil Nadu, and to the best of my knowledge, there are at least 6,000 freedom fighters who we should be talking about. We should be teaching about them in the textbooks. We should be glorifying about their contributions. But I was barely given a list of 40 people and the contribution of the Maruthu brothers who were instrumental in the Jambu Dweep Declaration of 1801. That has completely been obliterated from Tamil Nadu's educational curriculum.
All right, last 30 seconds. Dharani, I'm asking you for the third time, why is the Maruthu brothers and their history, Muthuramalingam Thevar and his history, why is that not being taught in the history textbooks as freedom fighters to the students of Tamil Nadu? That is the basic thing that the governor raised.
And today there's a curfew in Sivagangai district.
Yeah.
Zaka, you must be aware of that because Sivagangai.
I was disconnected twice. Zaka.
Let Dharani respond. I have to wrap up after that.
4 times the last 2 minutes.
Dharani, yeah. 30 seconds.
See, because I was disconnected 3 times, I don't know why it was. See, BJP wants to divide and rule, and we don't want to learn about nationalism of BJP. We know, their patriotism. This party never played any role in Indian independence. We also know what our great Mahakavi Bharatiya told about BJP. They're nothing but fake Sudeshis. That's what he said, right? We do not want to take any lessons from what did. One of the leaders of the RSS wrote an apology letter to the Britishers. One of the leaders of the RSS wrote an apology letter to the Britishers saying, please free me from the jail.
Okay.
Now you have the audacity to come and talk about independence and freedom.
I got to wrap up. Sanjeev Verma, Salem Dharanidharan, I'm sorry, this kind of tutu meme is not what I expected. Certainly viewers of my show did not expect this. But as we wrap up, I want to bring you up to speed with some of the crucial election-related stories that our reporters have been filing from the ground. CNN News 18, in fact, sat down with some of the key power players in Rajasthan, Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot. We also spoke with Shivraj Singh Chauhan in Madhya Pradesh. These are some of the ground reports plus special interviews that our reporters have done from the ground, all as part of our coverage in the run-up to the battle for the states, where 5 state assemblies will go for election again in the next few weeks. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you again tomorrow night, same time.
सीएम फेस कौन है पार्टी का राजस्थान में? आप सीएम हैं पर पार्टी ये नहीं बोल रही है कि सीएम कौन होगा। फिर वही कहीं सचिन पायलट, अशोक गहलोत की लड़ाई वाली बात दोबारा आ जाए जब इलेक्शन के नतीजे आए।
देखिए, झूठ नहीं बोलने की हमारी पार्टी की बहुत बड़ी खासियत ये है, एक बार जब जो है फैसला हो जाता है हाईकमांड का, चाहे किसी के पक्ष में हो, उसके बाद में कोई उसको चैलेंज नहीं करता। ये हमारी पार्टी की खासियत रही है। आगे कोई चैलेंज नहीं करेगा, जिसके लिए फैसला करेंगे सबको मंजूर होगा।
क्योंकि अभी आपने कहा कि आप तो शायद कुर्सी छोड़ दें, पर कुर्सी आपको नहीं छोड़ना चाह रही है, तो उस स्टेटमेंट के मुद्दे कि आप दोबारा मुख्यमंत्री बनना चाहते हैं अगर पार्टी जीते।
देखिए, पॉलिटिक्स कहती है कि मैं अभी कैसे कह सकता हूँ कि आगे कौन क्या बनेगा या मैं नहीं बनूंगा। पार्टी इंटरेस्ट के अंदर मैंने कहा, वो इसलिए कहा मैंने उस वक्त में, जिससे कि और लोगों को लगे कि भाई हम भी मुख्यमंत्री बन सकते हैं। ऐसा नहीं कि परमानेंट ही बने रहेंगे, मैंने जानबूझ के कहा है। इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि मैं मुख्यमंत्री बनना नहीं चाहता, नहीं बनूंगा, क्योंकि पार्टी जीतेगी मान तभी तो बन पाएंगे ना। और पार्टी जीतेगी तब जब मालूम पड़े भाई कहाँ हमें किसको वोट देना है, किसके लिए वोट देना है। तो वो जो स्पेस है, वो स्पेस मैं थोड़ी खत्म कर सकता पार्टी के लिए। अगर मैंने काम किया है और लोग क्या सीएम ने अच्छा काम किया है, उसके लिए वोट दे रहे हम लोग, वो स्पेस मैं खत्म क्यों करूंगा। मैं कहूंगा कि अगर ये स्थिति बनती है, मैंने कहा मुख्यमंत्री पद मुझे नहीं छोड़ेगा, नहीं छोड़ रहा है और लगता नहीं छोड़ेगा, तो सारे संदेश मैंने काम लिए वो सोच समझ के लिए।
सचिन पायलट से एक बार बहुत ज्यादा आपकी पहले बहुत ज्यादा ऐसे निकम्मा गद्दार कई चीजें कही गई, आपको लगता है वो बातें अब पुरानी है, अब आप कोई गिले शिकवे नहीं रहे सचिन पायलट के साथ?
नहीं, जो शब्द आपने काम लिए वैसे कभी काम नहीं लिए उनके लिए। वो नौजवान साथी हमारा है, केंद्रीय मंत्री बनवाने में मेरी भूमिका थी, उनको मैंने सिफारिश की थी।
वॉर फ्रंट है यानी लेबनान इजराइल बॉर्डर का, उसके सबसे नजदीक के अस्पताल में भी हैं और वैसी जगह पे हैं जो कि बॉम्ब और रॉकेट से सुरक्षित है। यहाँ रॉकेट और मिसाइल का असर नहीं हो सकता। इजराइल हर तरफ से विवादित बॉर्डर से घिरा हुआ है और इस वक्त हम लोग एक ऐसे बॉर्डर पे हैं जहां इस वक्त झड़प चल रही है और कभी भी बड़े युद्ध की शक्ल ले सकती है। ये देखिए, गैलीली मेडिकल सेंटर है, नहारिया शहर में है। नहारिया शहर में ये बड़ा मेडिकल अस्पताल है और उसके इमरजेंसी डिपार्टमेंट में है। यहाँ लाने का मकसद ये है कि ये सबसे बड़ा अस्पताल है जो इजराइल के किसी भी बॉर्डर से, कई दुश्मन देश हैं इजराइल के, कई देशों से इजराइल की लड़ाई है हर बॉर्डर पे, लेकिन ये सबसे करीब का अस्पताल है। 10 किलोमीटर से कम के अंदर में ये अस्पताल है। यहाँ से लेबनान बॉर्डर दिखता है और ये इमरजेंसी वार्ड, आपको बता दे, ये इमरजेंसी वार्ड है और ये जो इलाका इमरजेंसी वार्ड में अगर बॉम्बिंग भी हो, मिसाइल भी दागे जाए तो यहाँ का जो कामकाज है वो ठप नहीं होगा। ये जो देखिए, बहुत मजबूती से इन दीवारों को खास तरीके से बनाया गया और इसका मकसद ये है, ये बुलेट प्रूफ कांच है, ये बुलेट प्रूफ कांच है। ये दिखा दे, यहाँ बॉम्ब स्प्लिंटर जो रॉकेट से निकलते उनका असर नहीं होगा। किस तरह से ये बनाए गए हैं आपको अंदाजा लग सकता है। और इसी तरह से हॉस्पिटल को तैयार किया गया। 2006 में जब इजराइल और लेबनान की वॉर छिड़ी थी, तब भी इस हॉस्पिटल की मजबूती इतनी थी कि यहाँ कोई असर नहीं हुआ था, जबकि एक जो हमला किया गया था हिजबुल्लाह की तरफ से वो यहाँ तक पहुँचा था अस्पताल के ऊपरी माले पे। लेकिन ये इमरजेंसी वार्ड है, युद्ध अगर बहुत आगे भी बढ़ा तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं होगी। ये देख सकते बहुत मजबूती से इन जगहों को बनाया गया है। ये पूरा जो इमरजेंसी वार्ड है, यहाँ बॉम्ब रॉकेट का असर नहीं होगा। आप देख सकते हैं इनकी इसकी मजबूती, गेट, ये स्टील, ये देखिए इसकी मजबूती। जिस तरह से शेल्टर होते हैं दक्षिणी इजराइल में, उस तरह के शेल्टर की तरह ये पूरा अस्पताल है। बॉम्बिंग होते रहे, कोई असर नहीं होने वाला। हमारे साथ बातचीत करने के लिए मौजूद हैं अस्पताल के। व्हाट्स योर नेम मैम एंड व्हाट्स योर पोजीशन?
Sharon Mann from the International Affairs.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Day 19, the war is being fought at the United Nations as well now. Israel wants the UN Secretary General to resign. We'll tell you why. Also, how Israel lost the plot, why it did not see the Hamas attack coming, and how its response was shoddy initially. New details and probe reports expose multiple failures on the Israeli side. Meanwhile, Hamas is holding hostages in their tunnels, a network that spans hundreds of kilometers and may prove to be their biggest weapon. We'll tell you all about it. In China, Xi Jinping changes tone, says he's willing to cooperate and manage differences with the US. iPhone maker Foxconn is under investigation. Is this China's way of meddling in the Taiwan election? In Pakistan, hundreds of flights have been grounded, but missiles are flying. We'll tell you their story of misplaced priorities. In South Africa, hundreds of miners have been stuck in a gold mine for 3 days, apparently as hostages. It's the stuff of movies. And Meta has been sued for hurting the mental health of people. We'll bring you all these stories and more. The headlines first. Israeli strikes hit Syria's Aleppo airport again, the 4th time in 2 weeks. The airstrikes also killed 8 Syrian troops. Israel says they are in response to rocket fire. Since last week, pro-Hezbollah groups in Syria have exchanged frequent cross-border fire with Israel. Another controversial Chinese ship arrives in Sri Lanka. Both India and the US have expressed concerns. Last year, New Delhi had objected to a Chinese ship docking in Sri Lanka. India believes China is using these so-called research ships to spy. India to restart issuing visas to Canadians. Business, medical and conference visa services to resume at India's Toronto and Vancouver consulates. Last month, New Delhi had suspended the services amid a diplomatic spat with the Trudeau government. Hong Kong's pro-China leader John Lee says they will create their own national security law in 2024. 4 years ago, Beijing imposed a similar law on Hong Kong. It was aimed at curbing dissent and came in response to pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong in 2019. Sudan's army agrees to fresh talks on ending the war. The conflict with the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces began in the month of April. The war has killed more than 9,000 people and displaced more than 5.6 million. The talks will be brokered by the US and Saudi Arabia. The first round of talks were called off in June. And Japan's Supreme Court delivers a landmark verdict on transgender rights. It rules that the transgender sterilization law is unconstitutional. The law requires transgender people to have their reproductive organs removed to change their gender.
The attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum.
The Secretary General must resign.
It's day 19 of the Israel-Hamas war. The action has 2 theaters now. The first is in New York at the United Nations Security Council. The second is in Gaza, where the bombs continue to rain. Let's start with the political battleground. On Tuesday, the UNSC, the United Nations Security Council, held an open debate on this war. The first speaker was Antonio Guterres, the United Nations chief. And he said the Hamas attack on Israel did not happen in a vacuum. In other words, Israel is also to blame.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished.
Israel is not taking that well. Guterres basically blamed them, the Israelis, for the Hamas attack, and that too at the United Nations Security Council. So Israel now says Guterres must resign.
The UN is failing, and you, Mr. Secretary General, have lost all morality and impartiality. Because when you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And I think that the Secretary General must resign. Because from now on, every day that he is here in this building, unless he apologizes immediately, today we called him to apologize, there's no justification to the existence of this building.
We understand what Guterres was trying to say, but his choice of words, poor at best. He's now tried to clarify his remarks. Guterres says that he was not defending the Hamas attack, he was only speaking of Palestinian grievances. Let's see if Israel buys his clarification. Now, after Guterres, the UNSC members took turns. The US was represented by Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He said all acts of terror are unjustifiable, whether in Nairobi, Mumbai or New York. He was referring to the 26/11 attack on Mumbai in 2008. He also had a warning for Iran. Blinken promised swift and decisive action if US assets were targeted. But he did not call for a ceasefire. That demand came from the Muslim world. All of them rallied behind Palestine. Listen to this.
Iran aligned with international community in endorsing the call for an immediate ceasefire and a cessation of Israeli relentless military aggression.
It seems that Israel is above the law. It is violating international law without any deterrent. It is running roughshod over Security Council resolutions.
The international community must take a firm stance to end military operations, double standards and selectivity abiding by UN laws and resolutions. This policy has dangerous repercussions that go beyond this crisis.
Some prefer to look the other way in face of such atrocities. They prefer not to speak about crimes against humanity and war crimes. They prefer to pretend as if Palestinian people are just numbers and they have no souls and rights.
How about that? Iran, Turkey and Saudi Arabia on the same page. You don't see that every day. But how likely is a ceasefire, or at least a temporary truce? Well, there seem to be two proposals on the table. The US wants a pause in the fighting, not a ceasefire. They're calling it a pause, so that aid and resources can enter Gaza. Russia wants a ceasefire. They want Israel to stop the war. And both these countries have a veto power, meaning they can defeat the other's proposal. So where does that leave Gaza? Helpless. A UN Security Council resolution is binding. It puts pressure on Israel to stop the war. Without it, Israel can prepare for the ground invasion. And the US has made this clear, its position clear. It is not time for a ceasefire, says the US.
As I said from the beginning, we want to see all measure of protection for civilians, and pauses in operation is a tool and a tactic that can do that for temporary periods of time.
So does that mean
that is not the same as saying a ceasefire. Again, right now, we believe a ceasefire benefits Hamas, a general ceasefire.
Meanwhile, the situation in Gaza continues to get worse. Around 700 Gazans were killed in the last 24 hours, 700. The overall death toll is around 6,500, and half of them are children. I'll repeat that. Half of the fatalities in Gaza are children. If there is a ground invasion, that could increase. Most of Gaza is now just debris. piles of concrete, twisted metal and dust. Imagine living in this situation. It's a daily wait for the next Israeli airstrike, and when it hits, your worst nightmare begins. That's what happened in Gaza City. A father was trapped under the rubble after rockets destroyed his home. When rescuers got to him, he had just one question: is my family safe?
الله يا اخوان مرتك واحمد وهلا واموله وانت 100% طلعوا هالقد كلهم عايشين في الشلال. اطلع يلا كلهم عايشين. مرتك طلعناها واموله طلعناها وهلا طلعناها واموله طلعناها وشرف امي في الشلال تضايق.
The hospitals are another horror story. The WHO says there are 35 hospitals in Gaza, 35. Out of them, 12 are shut down. Same with healthcare centers. 46 out of 72 healthcare centers are not functioning in Gaza. Medicines, food and power are low. Officials say hospitals are on the brink of total collapse. Fuel seems to be the biggest worry. Israel has blocked fuel deliveries into Gaza. As a result, power is running out. The United Nations says that operations in Gaza could end by tonight. And how will this affect patients? Well, no power means no ventilators, no life support. This could put 2,000 cancer patients at risk, also 130 premature babies. These babies cannot breathe on their own. They are in incubators. One video sums up how bad things are. It was shot at the Indonesian hospital in Gaza. It shows an ambulance arriving in complete darkness. No street lamps, no lights at the hospital. Everything is pitch black. Doctors had to light the way with their mobile phones. It tells you how bad the situation is. And this is before the ground invasion. We've been hearing about it since day one, the ground invasion, that Israel will invade the Gaza Strip. Well, the army says it's ready.
The IDF is ready for ground operations and will take a decision together with the political establishment regarding the manner and the timing of the next stage. We are conducting a war.
The army is ready. So what is the holdup? There are multiple factors at play here. Number one, hostages. The Hamas still holds more than 200 people. Some of them are dual nationals. If Israel invades, their future is uncertain. So there is pressure from Western countries, including the US. They want Israel to delay the operation, to buy time and get the hostages out. Number two, the end game. Israel says it wants to eradicate the Hamas. Great. But what comes after that? Who do they leave in charge of Gaza? Reports say Benjamin Netanyahu has not decided on that. And that's a key issue. Defeating and eradicating are two very different things. Just ask the Americans. They defeated the Taliban in 2001. They occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. But in the end, the Taliban came back. Israel should be mindful of that. Number three, the cost of invasion. And I do not mean the financial cost. I mean the human cost. Israel is committing thousands of soldiers into a deadly battlefield. They don't know what Hamas has planned. Chances are it will be a tough urban war. And that means casualties. So you can't just rush in the door, because if you do, it could be a trap. And finally, reason number four, the fear of a wider war. The Hezbollah has already threatened to join this war. Invading Gaza would give them an excuse. Today, the Hezbollah chief held an important meeting in Lebanon. Leaders of Hamas and the Islamic Jihad also attended. And what did they discuss? A route to victory against Israel. So Israel could end up fighting a two-front war. And US support or not, that's a scary prospect. So Netanyahu is taking his time. His popularity is already low. Another bad decision could seal his fate. So 19 days of the war, 19 days since Hamas attacked Israel, and one question still remains unanswered. How did all of this happen? How did Hamas pull off the October 7th attack? How did Israel not see it coming? We still don't have an answer, but we've been following some clues and reports, and here are the four things that we've learned. One, Israel got warnings that it ignored. Two, their own intelligence failed. Three, once the attack happened, they failed to respond to the situation. And four, now Netanyahu and team are trying to bury all of this. Tonight, we want to tell you about Israel's comprehensive failure, starting with the tip-offs. They came from Egypt. Apparently, Cairo gave repeated warnings to Israel. An Egyptian intelligence official has been speaking about this. We don't know his identity, but we understand that he often mediates between Israel and Hamas. And he says the Israeli government was repeatedly warned. The message they were sent was this: Hamas is planning something big. And they did not leave it at that. They informed Prime Minister Netanyahu personally. Reports say Egypt's intelligence minister called Netanyahu. His name is General Abbas Kamel. And this call was apparently made 10 days before the Hamas attack. But Netanyahu denies all of it. His office insists that no such call came from Egypt. So it's his word against the Egyptians. Meanwhile, more Israeli officials are now speaking out, like this man, Amos Yadlin. He's a former Israeli intelligence chief, and he says Prime Minister Netanyahu was distracted. He was pushing a controversial judicial reform. It plunged the country into chaos. There was widespread protest in Israel. Even military reservists had turned against the government. And all of this weakened Israeli defenses. So did the warnings from Egypt slip through the cracks? Let me quote from what Yadlin said. Netanyahu got all the warnings from his defense minister, from the chief of staff, from the head of intelligence, from the head of Shin Bet, and from independent writers like me, like others, that this is weakening Israeli deterrence and endangering Israeli national security. So he got the warnings, apparently. Did the Prime Minister then drop the ball? It is now a matter of investigation. But this was just the first lapse. They did not pay heed to the warnings. That was the first lapse, a serious one. Israel's own intelligence failed to see what Hamas was up to. That is failure number 2. They used to have an aura of invincibility. The October 7 attack demolished it. Israeli spies were caught with their eyes shut. A preliminary assessment has found 2 lapses: communication and surveillance. Intelligence officials failed to track key channels, the ones that Hamas used, and the surveillance apparatus failed. Israel uses a lot of high-tech border surveillance equipment like sensors, cameras, and other espionage systems. Officials now say that this over-dependence on the systems cost them. Hamas exploited it. They shut down the systems, leaving the Israeli side blind, and then they launched the attacks. Then came the third lapse, the third failure, the military. They failed to respond. The Israeli military has done an internal review, and they found 2 gaps in their response. First, when the Hamas attack began, the Israeli army brass was clustered at a base near Gaza. All the top leaders converged there. And this slowed their response. They could not engage effectively with their teams. And gap number 2 was that they underestimated the Hamas. Israel tracks Hamas activities in Gaza. It listens to their conversations, and reports say they did pick up some chatter. They picked up statements like these, like, we are not preparing for battle. They heard Hamas leaders saying this, that they're not preparing for battle. And this should have raised red flags. But the Israelis took these statements at face value, and it proved to be disastrous. Now, all of this is being investigated. A government commission of inquiry will oversee the investigation. Reports say Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to, quote-unquote, rig the jury and to dictate who gets to sit on this panel. His critics say he is manipulating the commission. His ratings are falling. There are calls for him to resign. And this is a case study for the whole world. When it comes to security, you cannot afford complacency. Domestic politics cannot be allowed to compromise national security.
Galilee Medical Center.
Tell me about something about this hospital. What is the characteristics? It is the closest hospital near the border.
Yes, this is the closest hospital to any border of Israel. It's we're 6 miles from the Lebanese border, the northern border, and we serve a very diverse community of
more than 6 lakhs.
Yeah, we serve a community of about 660,000 people.
What is the, here you told me that even bomb can't destruct the structure.
Our emergency department is fortified and protected.
This is very protected.
Yes, so it can be completely closed.
This is like a shelter.
It is exactly a shelter. It is exactly a shelter. So the idea is to provide a structure that we can provide care, hopefully all the time in times of peace, but
and the time of war, because your country is in the time of war.
Yes, but also in the time of war. We want
Can you tell me something about the structure? कुछ बता सकती हैं? Can you
It's
tell?
built. You can see the very thick walls. It could be completely.
बहुत मोटी दीवारें हैं, देखिएगा. और कुछ है?
It's fortified. It's protected. It's essentially a bomb shelter.
From top also?
It's a bomb shelter essentially, and
ये बॉम्ब शेल्टर है, इमरजेंसी वार्ड है, लेकिन बॉम्ब शेल्टर की तरह भी इसका इस्तेमाल होता है. यहाँ अगर बॉम्बिंग भी हो, जिस तरह के रॉकेट हमास छोड़ता है दक्षिणी इलाके में या हिजबुल्ला छोड़ता है उत्तरी इलाके में, लेबनान इजराइल की बॉर्डर पे हैं, यहाँ कुछ भी
So Israel missed the red flags, but Hamas was not exactly shouting from rooftops. Their planning was extensive and secretive. It began almost 2 years ago, and reports say that tunnels in Gaza helped them. These tunnels run across the Gaza Strip. They also have phone lines inside. We're talking about the old school ones, the landlines. Hamas terrorists use these landlines to communicate. No mobile phones, no computers. The report says it was a small cell of terrorists. They stayed underground and they used these phones. And when the time was right, this cell was activated. Now, this report has not been officially confirmed, but it does add up. Israel constantly tracks Hamas leaders on their devices, so planning this over phone calls, mobile phone calls, would have been impossible, which is why Hamas used old school methods like landlines and meeting in person. Maybe that's why Israel was blindsided. But one thing keeps appearing in all such reports, whether it's about the planning or the communications or the hideouts, and that's the Gaza tunnels. It keeps coming back. Just how big is this network? Listen to this assessment by the Israeli army.
What Hamas has done since they took control almost 20 years ago of the Gaza Strip is basically to build a network of tunnels from Gaza City and under Gaza City, which is the center and the biggest part of their infrastructure, all the way down to Khan Yunis and Rafah. So imagine we're looking at the Gaza Strip, but really think of the Gaza Strip as one layer for the civilians and then another layer for Hamas. And what we're doing now is that we are trying to get to that second layer.
Now, Hamas says there are 1,300 tunnels below Gaza. The network is said to be 500 kilometers long. That's what Hamas claims, 500 kilometers. Some of them are up to 70 meters deep. Their width is around 2 meters. Now, to give you some context, the entire Gaza Strip is around 41 kilometers long. So Hamas's claim may not be right. Nonetheless, it's a major asset for them, these tunnels. The first tunnels were constructed during Israel's occupation of Gaza, a classic resistance strategy. More tunnels were built after the Hamas took over. Their primary aim was smuggling. Back then, Gaza was under a full blockade. Even the Egyptian border was not open. So Hamas used these tunnels to smuggle goods. Many of these led from Gaza to Israel. One such tunnel was discovered in 2013. It was 1.6 kilometers long, 18 meters deep. Residents at an Israeli border town complained of noises. That's when the tunnel was discovered. During wars, these are major threats. You can booby-trap tunnels. You can also use them for ambushes. So the IDF has repeatedly tried to target them. In the 2021 war, they had some success. The IDF said it destroyed 100 kilometers of tunnels. Even this time in this war, tunnels are a target. Reports say Israel is thinking about flooding them. You flood the tunnels, you flush out Hamas terrorists. But there's also a downside here. Hamas is holding hostages in these same tunnels. 2 of them were released this week. Listen to how they described it.
It looked like a spider's web. There were many, many tunnels. We started walking in the tunnels. The earth was moist and it was very humid. We reached a hall where 25 other people had also gathered.
So the tunnels are extensive, and if Israel invades, that could be a problem. Hamas is said to have different types of tunnels below Gaza, one for smuggling, one for defensive operations like communicating and storing weapons, and one for offensive operations. That last one can be used to launch attacks. So how can Israel tackle this? Historically, tunnel warfare has been impossible. You can't send in soldiers, it's like walking into an obvious trap. You also cannot use bunker buster bombs because above these tunnels are civilians. If you bomb the tunnels, you bomb the civilians. Plus, Israel does not really know where the tunnels are. They've mapped some parts of it, but the whole thing is hundreds of kilometers long. It's impossible to trace all of it. And Hamas will be counting on that. They have no chance against Israel in the battlefield. The IDF is better funded, better trained, and better organized. But down in the tunnels, it's a different game altogether, one that will be played on Hamas's terms. In the past, many groups have used this strategy, and with success, like the Viet Cong in northern Vietnam. They built a massive network of tunnels which kept the Americans out. Can the Hamas pull off something similar? That's another concern for the Israeli leadership. Now let's move from actual tunnels to diplomatic landmines. The China-Taiwan conflict seems to have claimed a new victim. Taiwan's multi-billion-dollar firm Foxconn. It is now under investigation in China. China has sent its tax authorities after the firm. They're investigating multiple Foxconn plants all over China, specifically the land use at these plants. Now, Foxconn is a big company. It is famous for manufacturing iPhones. It is a Taiwanese firm with major operations in China. This company is valued at over $75 billion. It employs more than 1.2 million people, just to give you the scale of how big this is. And now they're under investigation. The motives are political. China wants to meddle in Taiwan's presidential election through this. If you watch this show, you already know that the Taiwan-China equation is fraught. But I'll still give you a quick primer. Taiwan is a self-governed island. It's always been like that. It was never ruled by the Communist Party in Beijing. But Beijing sees Taiwan as a wayward province. And it has promised to reunify Taiwan with the mainland by force if necessary. Now, when a pro-China party is in power in Taiwan, tensions ease. But when a pro-independence party comes to power, China becomes hostile, which is the case right now. Since 2016, the DPP has been in power. It's a party that wants Taiwan's formal independence from China, the DPP. Obviously, Beijing does not like it. And now it sees an opportunity because Taiwan is going to polls next January, presidential polls. The leading candidate is this man, Vice President Lai Ching-te. He's the sitting vice president, obviously a member of the ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party, or the DPP, the one that wants formal independence. So China has been piling pressure on them for years. It has cut routine government-to-government talks with Taiwan. It has visibly backed the DPP's opponents in every local and presidential election. And now it wants to ensure that the sitting VP does not come to power. But how is this related to the Foxconn probe? Through this man, Terry Goh, another presidential candidate, an opponent of the DPP, and the founder of Foxconn. He tried to run in the 2020 election as well on a Kuomintang ticket. Kuomintang is Taiwan's main opposition party, seen as more conciliatory towards Beijing. So China keeps backing it. But Terry Goh failed to become the Kuomintang presidential candidate in 2020. So this time around, he's decided to go solo, to stand as an independent candidate. And this is a problem for Beijing. If Terry Goh contests alone, he will split the opposition vote. And the ruling party is already leading in opinion polls. A vote split would ensure their victory. And that's the worst case scenario for Beijing, which is why it has put pressure on Foxconn to get their founder Terry Go to drop out of the presidential race. And this is not a hypothesis or an exaggeration, whatever I've just told you. Beijing has accidentally admitted to this through their state mouthpiece, the Global Times. Look at their recent report. It cites unnamed experts, and they say the Foxconn investigation may impact Taiwan's elections. Of course, China later refuted this report. It says the Foxconn probe is unrelated, that the tax inspections are all routine, and several companies are under the scanner. So is Foxconn. But here's a problem. These several companies have not been named. Only Foxconn has been named. And China is known for election interference. Taiwan's politicians have been quick to react to this. Here's what the frontrunner, the vice president, had to say.
During an election, China does not need to put pressure on Taiwanese companies, demanding they declare a position or even that they directly support a candidate they prefer, because this is a behavior where both sides can only lose.
And what about the Foxconn founder? What has Terry Go said? Apparently, he's gone under the radar. Foxconn shares have been bleeding in the markets. They've lost more than 5% of their value in 2 days. That means Go is losing millions of dollars every day. And that's a good reason to go underground and wait for all of this to blow over. Meanwhile, the opposition party, the Kuomintang party, has been relatively quiet. Perhaps they know that if they comment, they will be seen as pro-Beijing. And it has cost them in the last 2 elections. They don't want to risk a third one. Now, staying with China, let's look at its other diplomatic endeavors. Even though it's bullying Taiwan, it is also courting Taiwan's biggest backer, the United States of America. Now, it's no secret that Sino-US ties have hit a rocky patch, and that's an understatement. But while the jibes and condemnation take place in public, in private, there's been a lot of shuttle diplomacy. The US and China have been holding a string of high-level visits in recent months, all to gear up for a potential meeting between Joe Biden and Xi Jinping. And that meeting is expected soon. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is visiting the US tomorrow. He'll meet Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. This should set the groundwork for Xi Jinping to visit the US next month. And the Chinese president himself has issued a statement now. He says that China is willing to cooperate with the US. Here's our report.
The China-US relationship is chaotic. It tends to blow hot and cold. Last night, there was almost a warm, fluffy glow surrounding these ties. Chinese President Xi Jinping sent a letter with some hopeful words America's way. He said China was willing to cooperate with the US. Both sides had to manage their differences and work together to respond to global challenges. He wants stable Sino-US ties built on mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. All very poetic. Xi's letter wasn't completely optimistic, of course. He did mention a right way to get along and how it was crucial for the world. But overall, the letter ignited hopes of a potential meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. We'll get to that meeting in a moment. But before that, we should clarify that Xi's letter wasn't addressed to Biden. It was sent to an American non-profit organization dedicated to Sino-US relations. For years, the organization was led by Henry Kissinger, the former Secretary of State who actually forged America's relations with China. Kissinger has usually been lauded by China, so maybe Biden and his team shouldn't give Xi's letter too much importance. But nonetheless, it does signal a thaw in the frosty ties. That's something both Washington and Beijing have been working towards. Every month, you see a high-level bilateral meeting. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to Beijing in June. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen went in July. China's top diplomat, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, has been meeting American officials continuously, and he'll meet them again tomorrow in Washington.
During his visit to the United States, Foreign Minister Wang Yi will have in-depth exchanges of views with the top US officials on China-US relations. Also international and regional issues of common concern, as well as friendly exchanges with people from all walks of life in the US, in order to make clear China's principal position and legitimate concerns on China-US relations. We hope that the US side will work with the Chinese side.
The hopes are that Wang Yi's visit will pave the way for the big event, a meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden in the US next month. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit is taking place in San Francisco in about 3 weeks. Both Washington and Beijing seem to want Xi to attend it and meet Biden on the sidelines. But while it seems that their goals are aligned, the antics and posturing by both sides may still play spoiler. The US has imposed new chip export controls on China. It's also released a report on China's military activity, which Beijing didn't take kindly to at all.
First of all, this US report is the same as similar reports it released earlier. It ignores facts, it is full of bias and spreads the China threat theory in order to make excuses for maintaining its own military hegemony.
That scathing attack was from a few days ago. It shows how tenuous the situation is, and how there's no guarantee that the Biden-Xi meet will take place. But even if it does, will anything meaningful come out of it?
Vantage continues after a short break.
असर नहीं होगा यहाँ ये these glasses are bomb.
Well, you can see that's outside the door, but the ceiling that is over the area where the ambulances come in.
Please show me.
Is also built to a higher fortified dimension.
देखिए ये भी fortified है. ये
provides protection.
ये भी जब एम्बुलेंस से मरीजों को लाया जाता है तो ये भी फोर्टिफाइड है, यानी इतना मजबूत है कि बॉम्ब और रॉकेट का असर नहीं होगा, इस तरीके से बनाया गया. तो यहाँ भी लोग छुपेंगे. और ये ग्लासेस जो हैं ये बुलेट प्रूफ हैं, स्प्लिंटर प्रूफ हैं. हम आपको
incoming patients and healthcare workers are provided protection as they.
तो सबको प्रोटेक्शन मिलेगा, जो चाहे इंजर्ड हो, जो सोल्जर आए, जो आम नागरिक आए या आम लोग हो, यहाँ के स्टाफ हो. अगर यहाँ वो हैं तो जो इलाज की पूरी कार्रवाई होती है उस पर कोई असर नहीं होगा. और हम सबसे इजराइल और किसी देश के बॉर्डर के बीच में, इजराइल और बाकी देशों के बीच जो बॉर्डर है उसके सबसे नज़दीक के अस्पताल में है. और कह सकते हैं कि जो दूसरा वॉर फ्रंट है यानी लेबनान इजराइल बॉर्डर का, उसके सबसे नज़दीक के अस्पताल में भी हैं और वैसी जगह पे हैं जो कि बॉम्ब और रॉकेट से सुरक्षित है. यहाँ रॉकेट और मिसाइल का असर नहीं हो सकता. इजराइल हर तरफ से विवादित बॉर्डर से घिरा हुआ है और इस वक्त हम लोग एक ऐसे बॉर्डर पे हैं जहां इस वक्त झड़प चल रही है और कभी भी बड़े युद्ध की शक्ल ले सकती है. ये देखिए गैलीली मेडिकल सेंटर है, नहारिया शहर में है. नहारिया शहर में ये बड़ा मेडिकल अस्पताल है और उसके इमरजेंसी डिपार्टमेंट में है. यहाँ लाने का मकसद ये है कि ये सबसे बड़ा अस्पताल है जो इजराइल के किसी भी बॉर्डर से, कई दुश्मन देश हैं इजराइल के, कई देशों से इजराइल की लड़ाई है हर बॉर्डर पे, लेकिन ये सबसे करीब का अस्पताल है. 10 किलोमीटर से कम के अंदर में ये अस्पताल है. यहाँ से लेबनान बॉर्डर दिखता है. और ये इमरजेंसी वार्ड, आपको बता दे, ये इमरजेंसी वार्ड है. और ये जो इलाका इमरजेंसी वार्ड में अगर बॉम्बिंग भी हो, मिसाइल